And then the payoff of that scene, I think I might have laughed out loud.
Once you become, dare I say, an aficionado of the Wilhelm scream, you cannot miss it.
There's a moratorium on any comments about 1970s AM radio hits for the rest of today.
All right, summer is over. The kids are back in school, so that is the perfect time to visit the amusement park. Hopefully the crowds are down.
That's right.
It's a lot more scary as well. Welcome. This is the Fright Club podcast, and she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And we're from madwolf.com, and thanks to everybody, first of all, right out of the gate, except for me, at the last Fright Club Live, where you showed The Last Circus. The first one in, 4 years?
At least 4 years.
That I had to miss.
Yep.
Darn day job.
That's right.
I had to go host the Pizza Challenge.
That's right,
here
you
in
did.
Columbus. So you guys had fun without me.
We did, and actually, I really want to thank Chris Hamill, the president and programmer at Gateway Film Center, because I can't do a podcast, it turns out, without you. And so
I knew I was here for something.
So he helped us to fill in that time where we normally record the podcast before we show the movie by doing this really cool sort of hands-on plus QA thing about projection and film, because the film that we watched, The Last Circus, he brought in 35 millimeter, but of course at Gateway Film Center they can also do 70 millimeter, and so we got this really cool sort of presentation about film itself and about platters and reel to reel and 70 millimeter and 35 millimeter, and then he took a bunch of questions and it was awesome. So thank you so much, Chris, for doing that.
And there was we really appreciated the crowd because there was a lot of competition that night. Film Festival of Columbus opened up. There was a lot of stuff going on.
Film Festival of Columbus the lineup for that was just killer.
Yeah.
It was so great, especially that first night, which is the night that we had Fright Club. And then they also, because Gateway does do so many film, they bring so much film, and they had, during Fright Club, they were also showing the 35 millimeter print of Creepshow.
Yeah.
There was just so much going on. And so, thanks to everybody who came to Fright Club, because there were 1,000 other things just at the Gateway that you could have been doing. So thank you.
Yeah, that was good. So we look forward to the next Fright Club Live, which is going to be Train to Busan.
Yes, and we are going to do vehicular horror to coincide with that. And I'm excited. We've seen it on a big screen once before, but I'm excited. I mean, it's such a visceral and fast-moving, and it's a great movie to look at. I mean, I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah, so that's going to be October the 9th.
Yep.
Back at Gateway Film Center. So good stuff. We're talking about amusements this time. Is that an idea that we stole from somebody? I've heard we do that.
We do that. We do. Actually, the next one we're going to do, we lifted. It was larceny. But no, this one actually, it was just that I knew that I wanted to show The Last Circus, and we've already done one on clowns. So I was just sort of thinking about, what could we do to go along with The Last Circus? And I thought about circuses, and I did come up with 5 circus movies, but they seemed a little limiting. And with It Chapter 2 out, I thought, how can we work more of these things together?
I think from here on in, it's not that we steal ideas, it's that we homage. We homage our favorite ideas.
That's right.
Doesn't that sound better?
That does sound better. You know what, though? I mean, as long as we're pointing that out, we should say again, thanks to Jenny Rhea for joining us in the last...
Oh, yeah, Jen Dreadful.
That's right, Jen Dreadful, who we stole. She is Phantom Dark Dave's co-host.
Homage. Homage.
I don't think we homaged Jenny. I think we stole her. And we missed Dave. We were sorry that he couldn't make it. But I think that we're percolating a new idea for later this year when Dave and Jenny can join us, and we'll probably do Trauma. And that'll be fun because you will hate every single movie.
You know what? I'll just turn the mic on and go sit down and go read a book or something. I'll come back. No, that's all right. We don't always get to do our favorite. Well, you get to do a lot of your favorites, but
yeah, I do.
Yeah. But that's kind of how it works. I'm here for the podcast.
That's right.
That's
you know
right.
what, though? Before we jump in, I want to say thank you to Katie for coming out to Fright Club, because Katie of D-Zack and the Pint of Joes, she came out.
I love their first album.
We don't get to see her that often, but she said that she like listened to 30 like of the back catalog, like the early Fright Clubs, which made me just like oh God, they were so. I mean, we were a little rusty at first. It took us a minute to get our groove on. So thanks for putting up with all of that.
They were good. You know, we felt good about them at the time, but it's like when you hear that early recording, like before someone like Billy Joel got a recording contract, something he recorded, at his friend's studio. You're like, oh, I do hear some talent there, but ooh, that needs some work. So just think of this as early Billy Joel,
No,
Katie.
God, don't think of us as Billy Joel at all. Why would you pick Billy Joel? I hate him.
He's got some stuff. I like some Billy Joel.
I hate Billy Joel.
How did this turn into a ragging on Billy Joel? Gee whiz. This got way off the rails. All right, amusements. There's a bunch here I see in the notes that didn't make the list but are worthy of a mention.
I think we kind of wanted to talk about It Chapter 2 because it's new, but it's not, I only picked 5. We only picked 5, so it didn't quite make that list. But I think it'd be worth maybe a quick mention.
Yeah, well, overall, It Chapter 2, as we talked about in detail on our other podcast, The Screening Room, check it out.
That's right.
We were a little disappointed in It Chapter 2 just because we liked It Chapter 1 so much, and that's going to be coming up here soon. I'm sure we're going to be talking about that movie. But it's got some moments, but it's way too long, and it just seems a lot more undisciplined than number 1. And of course, it suffers from the source material. It has a hard time wrapping that story up. I think we both think that It Chapter 2 improves upon the book ending and the TV miniseries ending, but still just Chapter 1.
It's unwieldy, and I was so bothered by the CGI. It's like so bothered by it, and I don't know if it was a conscious decision that was the look that they were going for, but right from when Beverly goes home, which is the trailer, right? So and Jessica Chastain, who's always great, she's great in that scene. And then the payoff of that scene, I think I might have laughed out loud like that. And then the style of that CGI, and it wasn't the only style they used, because as we talked about on the other podcast, when it's Pennywise specific, it looks great. It's cool looking. Mm-hmm. And still a lot of the imagery that they use with all the balloons and with him, but
too much of it, especially in the middle, just seemed to be all constructed for a clearly telegraphed jump scare. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Although I did think the ending rescued it a little bit.
Yeah.
I did like the slam bang, guns blazing ending, and some of the psychological probing it was doing worked a little bit better. But all in all,
we were a little bit disappointed.
Not as good as It Chapter 1, but we'll get to that. All right, besides It Chapter 2, what else is in here?
Well, there are a couple of classics that I tossed around and wound up not making the final cut. So The Unknown and The Man Who Laughs, both awesome. And then there are some that, The Lost Boys. I don't think we've ever had The Lost Boys on a list, and I would really love to talk about that.
It's funny, go back to The Man Who Laughs just a minute.
Yeah.
I was reminded, we were flipping channels the other night, and Casablanca was on, which he is in.
Oh.
And you just, that's right. And then you look back at his career, and I was reminded of that. But okay, I digress.
That's okay. Yeah, The Lost Boys, which just didn't quite make it either. Although, there are a couple of movies in here that remind me a bit of Santa Carla and The Lost Boys.
Oh, yeah.
And then there are some that aren't good, but are always worth a mention. So Funhouse, Tobe Hooper's Funhouse. I think I'm bringing it up now because I think people are going to be mad that it's not on the list because it's Tobe Hooper and his beloved. And
that wasn't his first movie?
No,
okay, sorry.
No. And it wasn't his best either, as we know. One of them that I thought when I first did this would make it was Something Wicked This Way Comes, but I went back and watched it again, and it's not a horror film. It's not. It's really kind of a family movie. It's spooky, but it has that super nostalgic framing device that I hate, and it didn't quite make the cut either. Here's another one that's going to make people mad, I think. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. You hate that movie. It's fun, campy badness, but there are some really solid films. Clown House is one that we've talked about before, mainly because Sam Rockwell is in it.
Yeah.
Vampire Circus, that's the thing. When I was looking for specifically circus movies, Vampire Circus is a nutty Hammer movie that's worth checking out for its sheer nuttiness. And talk about nutty Baby Blood. Oh, my God. Baby Blood will never actually make a list unless we talk about really insane and terribly bad French films, which we might do someday.
It strikes me that we have talked about that at some point.
We talk about it, but it's never on a list because it's just terrible, but it's so batshit insane that I think people should watch it anyways.
Was that a category sometime, batshit insane?
Well, you know what? Maybe we should make it a category. I like it. And then the last one, which is not necessarily a horror movie, but it's horrifying, is the original Dumbo.
Yeah, that would be a strange one to put on a horror movie list. Dumbo.
It would be, but it kills you.
It does. At least the original does. Let's put it that way. Okay, that's everything on the outlying. Yep. So we've got 5 amusements, and woo, these are good ones.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, especially when you look at the one that lands at number 5, because to have this at the tail end of the list means it's a good one. A shy student trying to reach his family in Ohio a gun-toting tough guy trying to find the last Twinkie and a pair of sisters trying to get to an amusement park join forces to travel across zombie-filled America. 2009 Zombieland.
Welcome to Zombieland.
My mother always told me, someday you'll be good at something. I mean, I don't think she could have guessed that something would be zombie killing. What do you think? Zombie kill of the week?
Whoa.
You guys want some Purell?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we should say right out of the gate, take your red Sharpie and circle October 18th on that calendar because that is Zombieland Double Tap.
Double Tap.
Very excited. Very
So excited.
They've got the movie poster up. We were just at the theaters the other night, and they got the movie poster up.
I know.
And, yeah, excited.
I know. I'm very excited for that one because we loved Zombieland so much. I mean, they did everything so well, which is funny because the director, Ruben Fleischer, has gone on to really not be a very good director, to be honest with you. But, man, the writers... Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, they went on to do both Deadpools. And so they just have such an irreverent yet somehow sweet sense of humor that's perfect. Cinema is like the perfect way for it to bloom. And everything about Zombieland worked for me.
Yeah, and we've had this on many lists for good reason. So let's focus here on the amusement part of it because it works so well when they get to the amusement park. It really does.
It does. And part of the reason is because, of course, Columbus, Jesse Eisenberg, he's afraid of clowns. And so, and what a perfect place.
Right.
Oh, look at that fucking clown.
Yeah.
It was just such a great line anyway.
Yeah. And there's so many great set pieces. You got the one where they're trapped and being pursued on the big ride.
Yes.
And that is very tension-filled, and he gets to be the hero. Columbus does.
That's right.
And then, of course... You've got The Last Stand by Woody.
Tallahassee. Oh, my God.
That's such a great sequence.
It's amazing. And the whole film from beginning to end is just like a great action sequence after action sequence. They break into short, very funny bits that don't have action, but the movie is such an action film. And that scene with him alone in the kiosk and all of the guns blazing, oh, my God, it was just glorious. I think I do have to say, we're all watching the movie saying to ourselves, why are you going to an amusement park, girls? Do you know how much attention you're going to draw?
Exactly.
And I think they actually handle it pretty well. It's just like, this little girl and her childhood is over and her sister, who's not really her sister because they come from Little Rock and Wichita, but still just wants to give her a slice of her own childhood back. But you're like, but I mean, if you can get past that, what they do with it is just awesome.
Because not only is it just fun, but it gives such an added boost of visual, visual enticements. You've got all the rides and the lights and different things that you can use strategically to carve out tension or fun. Just shoot them up with the Woody Harrelson scene. They really use it to great effect in the architecture, for better word, of that amusement park.
Oh,
and it's
they
just
absolutely do.
Perfect.
Yeah, they absolutely
I agree.
do.
It's a little illogical, but they do, like you said, a pretty good job of making you just, all right, let's go with this and have fun. And it makes such good use of the amusement park. That's why it's on the list at number 5, Zombieland from 2009. Moving up to number 4, the one we were just kind of alluding to a little bit ago, just from a couple years ago. This one is set in the summer of 1989. A group of bullied kids band together to destroy the shape-shifting monster disguising itself as a clown, preying on the children of Derry. It, Chapter 1.
We all float down here.
I saw something. There was this
Clown. Yeah, I saw him too. Bill, if you'll come with me, you'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too.
We've talked about this one a lot lately, actually, of course, because Chapter 2 just came out.
Yeah.
If you go back in time to when it was about to come out, there was so much anticipation and a little dread and a little maybe anger because Tim Curry was so magnificent as Pennywise.
He was.
In the miniseries from 1990.
It was the best thing about it.
Oh, absolutely.
He really was.
There's no question. And so, I think that they did a lot of smart things with the new Pennywise because they made him not the same type of clown. And the clown that he was instead is sort of, reminiscent of like old-fashioned clowns. And Bill Skarsgård was just perfect.
Yeah, he really was. It's hard to do. It's hard to take something like that and carve out your own. You kind of think to the Joker character, which of course is now being reimagined again. But at the time, you thought nobody can play the Joker after Jack Nicholson.
Exactly.
And what did Heath Ledger do?
Right. He won the Oscar.
Totally his own thing.
Yeah.
So you've got to do that. He couldn't go in there trying to do a Tim Curry impression.
No.
That would be foolish.
It was.
You make it your own character and did a great job and was very scary.
Yes, he was incredibly scary. And the kids were great, which is, I think, another really important part of the success of this film is that all of those kids were wonderful.
Yeah, there's a great story I read about one of them in particular, Jack Dylan Grazer, who played Eddie. And he's gone on, really look out for that kid because also if you didn't see the Shazam movie, he's great in that too. This kid is talented. But anyway, when they were filming it early on, Bill Skarsgård, because of the reaction that Grazer was giving him, he was really worried that the kid was like being really scared.
Right.
And so after a scene, he asked him if he was okay, and the kids just looked up and said, "Love what you're doing with the character." And so Skarsgård said, "Okay, this kid is a pro." But you're right. All the kids were fantastic.
They were.
And we also, one thing we mentioned about this movie, and you have especially, was how well they did it, and what a smart decision it was to update it to the 80s.
It was. And, once you get to the second one, it makes sense because it brings the closure to present day. So that's obviously why they did it. But because they moved it from, ahead a couple of decades, it allowed them to rewrite all the dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, Stephen King, it's like, I hate to come out sounding like I'm criticizing Stephen King, one of the masters of horror, but his dialogue can be a little bit stale and trite and unbelievable, and he doesn't end very well. I'm sorry. And so,
which of course is a piece that is made fun of in It Chapter 2.
Yes,
That's a running gag in It Chapter 2.
That it doesn't end very well.
Yeah.
But because they updated it to the 80s, they got the chance to give these kids some very often really funny dialogue, and they don't entirely lose that kind of nostalgia that you end up when you're watching a movie where the kids grow up. But it felt less forced, I think, because it was set in the 80s as opposed to in the 50s or 60s.
It was so well done. The kids seemed so natural and had such a friendly chemistry, like they were a bunch of quote-unquote losers. And it's interesting, at the time, they asked all those actors, before they had cast Chapter 2, who they thought should play their grown-up roles. And two of them got them right, because Bill Hader was picked, and then, of course, Jessica Chastain was picked, because that makes perfect sense. So the two of them got them right.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah, in seeing their adult versions. But they do. It's a great cast of kids. And Pennywise, even though he has about, less than 4 minutes of actual dialogue.
Right.
It's all about the look.
Yeah.
And it's all about what they do with that character. And I just think it's downright scary.
Yeah.
So much scarier than the second one for me.
Yeah.
That it's so effective. And that's the catch-22 of having the first one be so good. That's why we were disappointed in the second one.
Yeah.
Even though it's not terrible. We're not saying it's terrible.
No.
It just didn't live up to our hopes after this one.
Right. And as we've said in other interviews, that the fact that you go from children in peril to adults in peril, that's a problem, because it's never going to be as scary.
Yeah.
But and we did like the second one, but man, we liked the first one.
Yeah, and if you want to go back to keep it to the amusements angle, the clown, that's the anchor, and Skarsgård does a great job.
He really does.
And
Go on.
yeah, and as we mentioned, two of our favorite things about the second one, there's new kid characters in peril. Those are great scenes in the second one. They're scary. It goes back to that children in peril, because we don't know these kids and what's going to happen. So second one does have its moments, but really love the first one, and that is why it's number 4 on our list of amusements. Moving up to number 3, this is just the one that we showed at the previous Fright Club Live that we would have done the podcast if I would have bothered to show up. Jeez. It's a young trapeze artist deciding between her lust for Sergio, the happy clown, or her affection for Javier, the sad clown, both of whom are deeply disturbed, to put it mildly. From 2010, The Last Circus.
So this is from the completely warped mind of Alex de la Iglesia, the writer and director. And he has done, usually with other writers, he's done a bunch of very bizarre films. Perdita Durango is one. Witching and Bitching is one. This is without comparison, my favorite of his films.
Even just for the way it looks, number one.
Yeah.
That's why we were so glad to show it on the big screen and in 35 millimeter,
Yes.
because even if you've seen it on the small screen, if you get a chance to see it on the big screen, do it.
Yeah, because it starts in Javier's childhood as his dad is a clown, and they're part of a circus, and they get forced, even in their costumes, to fight a battle against Franco's armies. And it's that's really it's funny. There are certain ways in which this film will remind you of like The Devil's Backbone or it's really
Del Toro type of fantasy.
Although it doesn't have the romantic sort of monster imagination of a Del Toro. It's just that it's mainly sort of allegorical to this battle. That's really what's happening. You've got a happy clown and a sad clown and the woman in the middle. And they are the two factions really who are fighting for the country of Spain. That's really, the whole thing is allegorical. And at the same time, you think this has gotten so out of hand, everybody's nuts. It really is a circus. The whole place is a circus. And I think that that's carried out well because I don't think it in any way overtakes the narrative itself, which is just fascinating about a sad clown who falls for the most sadistic, meanest happy clown you're ever going to find, falls for his woman. And it's a train wreck in the best way.
Well, and anytime you're thinking of a sad clown, you're going to think of that opera, Pagliacci, which is, of course, Italian. But this has operatic feelings to it.
Yeah, it does.
It has a feel of operatic moments to it.
It does.
And which I think they were obviously playing off of, because you're going to, for a lot of people, when you think of that classic sad clown, that's the character you think of. And
Yeah.
I think he had this in his back pocket.
Yeah, and if I go back to that Baby Blood, one of the things that I really liked about that is this kind of seedy circus vibe that it had, and that's what this has too. I mean, you're never really in the big top with them. You're sort of in the trenches, and they're introducing each other, and they're in their nasty like trailers where they live, and it's just so like unpleasant and freak show like. So often they're still wearing all of their costumes and their makeup, and the camaraderie among the freaks or just the circus people is really, I think, very sweet and fuels the whole film. And then Carolina Bang, who is also married to the director, she's the beautiful woman in the middle, and she also it's just such a spot-on performance, and the acrobatics are just so fun to watch. It looks great, and then it leads to this just completely batshit insane finale that, again, just works so well with the allegory itself, and also just with this madhouse story that Iglesias is telling.
And the film has many things, another of which is the Wilhelm scream.
What?
And I like to keep track of the Wilhelm scream. This movie features it several times, but the most prominent is probably when the two midgets are thrown out of the Wonderland cargo tent, about 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
Once you become, dare I say, an aficionado of the Wilhelm scream, you cannot miss it. You cannot miss it.
You can't. I know.
There it is.
Yep, you can't miss it. It is really true.
It's like hearing Michael McDonald singing background of a song. Once you've heard Steely Dan's Peg or something like that, well, that's Michael McDonald, and you're going to hear him, the king of yacht rock from here on in. So
I'm gonna. There's a moratorium on any comments about 1970s AM radio hits for the rest of today.
Look at the context here. I'm drawing a parallel between the Wilhelm scream and yacht rock. Where else are you going to get that?
Yeah.
Kind of hard-hitting
That's right.
discourse.
That's right.
Right
only
here.
in a horror movie podcast.
Right here on the Fright Club. That's why you want a Yamo be here. Oh! Thanks. I'll show myself out. Okay. The Last Circus, number 3 on our list, is this has gone completely off the rails, much like that movie. Moving up to number 2 from just this year. What? A family's serene beach vacation turns to chaos when their doppelgangers appear and begin to terrorize them. Jordan Peele's Us.
There's a family in our driveway.
It's probably the neighbors. But y'all scared of a family? Hi, can I help you?
Zora, put your shoes on.
If you want to get crazy, we can get crazy. What are you people?
It's us.
Do you know what we get to watch tonight, George?
Tonight?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Little Monsters.
Oh, man, that's right. Thank you to the person who shall remain nameless that hooked us up with an early screening of that.
Lupita Nyong'o,
Yeah.
zombies, a zoo, which makes me think that we're going to really quickly probably do a whole podcast on zoos, which we
Oh,
can do
yeah,
because I
we
already have
should.
5 in my head.
Yeah.
But before she went to the zoo, she went...
To the amusement
She
park.
did, and that is the one that most clearly recalls The Lost Boys.
Yes. And many other movies.
Yeah.
There's so many homages because he doesn't steal.
No, he doesn't steal. No.
The good artists don't steal.
No.
They homage.
They homage.
Yeah, there's so many of those callbacks starting right from the very beginning. Love it. And it's just another indication, more proof of what a horror movie student, as if we didn't know from Get Out, what a horror movie student Jordan Peele is.
Yeah.
And now he's proving to just play out his own vision so masterfully. And this one, it's so anchored in the amusement park
it is.
because without spoiling so much above ground and below ground right there, the amusement park, it's where things start, it's where things finish pretty much.
Yeah.
And you're right, it provides an incredible callback to the Lost Boys and also on the beach there to Jaws and some others.
Oh, yeah. One of the things I think that this movie, if just focused on the amusement park angle, and one of the reasons that I think amusement parks are a great setting for horror is the way that a horror film can take what is an innocent childhood entertainment and look at it in a way that is perverse, that it's this macabre perversion of childhood innocence. And I think that he does that really well in this movie, particularly, of course, when she goes into the Hall of Mirrors.
Right. Yeah, because everything hinges on that. When her trip as a young girl into the amusement park and then wandering off by herself. And then, of course, you get the moment that leads to the big twist, or the big reveal toward the end. It's so much about the amusement park. And then when you find out what's going on right underneath. It's masterful. Even if, and I've talked to a couple of people since then that said they guessed the twist. Okay, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But even if you do guess the twist right away, I didn't. It still has to work.
It does,
the way he constructs it, and it's constructed so well. And you're right about subverting those not only the childhood innocence, but here you're subverting the good times of a family vacation.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing. All the kids, adults even, will remember the fun of a family vacation they had. And you're taking that. Everybody's just having fun. The dad, as we said, is such a perfect goofball.
Oh, my God, he's great.
And then,
listen to, he's so great in this movie.
Yeah, he really is. And then things get horrific, and boy, they do, and they get pretty darn bloody.
Yes.
And it's all rooted in what happened at that amusement park, and it's so good. Now, it made me surprised in reading these notes that it was still this year.
Right, because we've talked about it a
so
lot.
often. It's just, man, because we talked about the big shoes to fill of a famous role that you're taking over. Jordan Peele had such shoes to fill of his own debut. Think, okay, what do you have for us now?
The sophomore slump is what he was facing, and boy, he
Not a
didn't.
slump, no.
No, and it's funny because a lot of times, a filmmaker will step out of the horror genre. It's a good place to make your mark because it's the easiest of the genres to make money, and obviously he made his mark. He won an Oscar for it, but his follow-up was another horror, which was great, and it didn't it was a completely different kind, and it was another just superior effort. And, I'm hoping that he sticks with us. I'm hoping that he continues to make horror movies.
And it's another one, much like Get Out, but in different ways, that invites so much continual discussion about it.
I think this one in particular, because so much of it is symbolic, but in an open-ended way, because it could mean multiple things.
Yes, exactly right. Get Out was pretty much more concrete about what he was saying.
Exactly.
You could, I suppose, argue it to degrees, or as I did with one person on Facebook, argue it to, well, you didn't get it.
Into the ground.
You didn't get it, sir. You didn't get it. But yeah, this one is much more open-ended by design, and it really invites that discussion, and it's fun to do. And boy, it was. When you think about one, when you were putting together this list, I was surprised that this came in at number 2 because it jumped right to the top of my thought. But then I look at number 1. I think, okay, all right, I'll give you that. So us at number 2 on our list of amusements in horror from just this year. Yeah, 2019. Hard to believe. Moving up to number 1, and if it slipped your mind, we'll put it right back in there right now. It's the classic from 1932, a circus's beautiful trapeze artist. It's always a trapeze artist.
It is.
Agrees to marry the leader of the sideshow performers, but his deformed friends discover she's only marrying him for his inheritance. Freaks.
We didn't lie to you, folks. We told you we had living, breathing monstrosities.
Look them laugh. They're swine. They can't hurt me, but they hurt me.
They're going to make you one of them, my peacock. Their code is a law unto themselves. Offend one, and you offend them all.
Somebody put out on social the last couple of weeks just the question, what's the first movie that comes to your mind when you think of controversial horror?
Yeah.
And this wasn't the first one that jumped to my mind, but boy, it's one of them.
Yeah,
It's got to be the first one, one of the very first ones to really cause a commotion.
It did. In fact, it more or less ended Todd Browning's career.
Yeah.
And he was flying high on the bat wings, right, of Dracula.
Dracula.
And his follow-up movie was very, very controversial because, of course, he used real circus performers. There's always that tug of war between whether or not what he's doing is exploiting them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because two members of the original cast were going to be Myrna Loy and Jean Harlow. At the time, huge stars.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Huge stars. And then when they learned more about what he was doing, they backed out. They backed right out. So, yeah, that's always the question of exploitation and original intent. But you're right. It's to think that he was riding so high off Dracula and then pretty much just got railroaded out of town.
Yeah. Well, this was not the first film that he made, with the kind of circus freak backdrop. And it was his own history. He had been a performer in the circus. He had been with the circus. And that's why I think it came so naturally to him. And that maybe it didn't even occur to him that he was, in fact, exploiting these people while he was also giving them jobs. And I mean, I do think that it's not as overt as maybe some people might think. But I remember that as a kid, always thinking like, well, I'm never going to watch that. And then finally one day I'm like, I need to watch this movie. And I love it. I mean, I truly love this movie.
Yeah, and of course, the One of Us has become just iconic and so influential.
I think that's one of the reasons that it has had such staying power, particularly, I think, with horror fans, because a lot of times horror fans individually see themselves as outsiders. And that is, the Ramones loved, right? It gives this sense of the community of outsiders. Like we don't want to be like you. You want to be like us. And if you don't, well, welcome to the Chicken Lady exhibit.
But then you get the whole device of someone screwing them over.
Oh, yeah.
And they find out that someone from the outside that you think was treating you as an equal is just trying to fleece you.
Oh, yeah. And, and I think that's another part of why it does have the staying power is that idea that, they're not, or, I think when you watch it, you see yourself as one of the freaks, right? So you know what I mean? Like, that's the point of view, that's the sympathetic point of view and I think that is very unusual, especially in 1932.
Oh, yeah.
That you're not watching the movie from the perspective of the two handsome people who are fleecing these people. You're seeing it from the perspective of the freaks.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful statement that he makes. And then the fact that, they're not the victims that the tall people think they are is also, I think, empowering to viewers who have seen themselves as outsiders.
Yeah, it was based on a novel. The original novel was called Spurs, and it was originally purchased as a property for Lon Chaney, but then he pretty much died right after the rights were purchased. So it went on went through a few different hands and a few different ideas for development before it became landed in Todd Browning's hands, and it actually had a different ending originally. It showed Hercules singing soprano in the new sideshow because he had been castrated.
Right.
And that was another piece that got intense negative reaction for some preview audiences. So that was cut. And apparently from what you read, there's some film historians to say there's much lost footage.
That doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. And, the ending itself, the final image, it's a weird one that doesn't make really any sense, regardless of the fact that it's become quite iconic. And it is really, it's the segments that lead to that, starting with the one of us, and then the guy with the knife in his teeth crawling through the mud. Todd Browning really gets creepy. The scary parts when the film finally decides that it's going to be scary, they are scary. They are creepy and unsettling.
Yeah.
And my favorite parts of the film. I just love those. The other thing I love about this movie, well, Hans, he's impossible not to love. He's just that sweet little chubby cheek-faced. He's so cute. And then, of course, Frida is the woman who really loves him, but he's going to throw Frida over because the beautiful Cleopatra wants to have him.
And, of course, the actor and actress there, they were brother and sister.
Yeah. Yes, that was what I was getting to, which just adds to the freaky nature of this movie.
Yeah.
Like, that's... and it's funny because you can't possibly not know that. They look and sound exactly alike.
They do, but you could see it from Todd Browning's perspective. Well, I'm going to cast them.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you could see that. And it was actually their reunion at the end of most of the prints of the movie. That was not part of the original ending. That was added to give the film a quote-unquote happier ending to get their reunion. But it's an endlessly fascinating movie, and it's become such a classic for so many reasons. And it's one of those things where you look back on and wonder, how could you get away with that today?
Right.
If you tried to do something like that, which it opens up such a can of worms in so many different ethical areas where some people would argue, like you just said, no, they're giving them jobs and, putting them in the film industry. But are you exploiting them for your own gain?
Yeah.
So it
is because, again, I think that the fact that it's from the point of that's the point of view that the film takes.
Yes.
I don't think that the film necessarily exploits them. On the other hand, there are a number of those actors who they didn't make their own conscious decision to be in a film.
Right. And I think going back, you can do some research. After the film came out and got its reaction, some of the actors, some supported it and some turned and realized, I'm not on board with this now.
Yeah.
So my memory is maybe escaping me a little bit now, but I think you had some that were still very supportive of it and some not. But that's just the kind of reaction that this movie had.
Yeah.
It's totally argued from all different angles. And let's face it, that's one of the reasons controversy helps sell things sometimes.
Yeah.
And this one has become a classic and sits at number 1 in our list of amusements in horror, 1932. It is Freaks.
Well, it's funny. You weren't there for the happy hour, but Richard, who comes to every Fright Club.
Yes, thank you.
And he was unhappy that he wasn't going to get to hear the podcast, and he was going to have to wait now to find out what the number 1 movie is. And he was just like, I just hope that I can count on you to not have forgotten Freaks. And I just looked to the ground like, I'm not saying anything. But no, Richard, we did not forget Freaks.
Did not. So yeah, I'll try to make it another 4 years before I can't make it to
That's goddamn right.
to a podcast recording. So all right, what do you think of these choices? What do you think of Freaks or anything else? Let us know. Or if you know what? I know there's some people that thought that It Chapter 2 was better than It Chapter 1. So
Well, I
let
bet
us
there
know
are a
about
lot of
that.
people who thought Killer Clowns from Outer Space ought to make this list.
Well, you may be right about that, too. So always love to keep the conversation going on Twitter. That's the easiest way. We're at Fright Club Pod. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. It's Mad Wolf Columbus. And the main website, where you can find all of our written reviews and our other podcasts that we mentioned, The Screening Room, and a bunch of other fun stuff. Even some Fright Club gear. What? It's available, people. You can find that on our main website, which is madwolf.com. So fun stuff. As we mentioned, the next Fright Club Live is going to be October the 9th, as we're going to show Train to Busan and talk about
vehicular horror. And somewhere in between here and there, we are homaging an idea from Jason and Brandon.
That's right. Homaging.
We're gonna do bars. We're gonna do bars in horror movies because that's fun. It's a fun idea, and I've had fun collecting some titles for it.
I haven't seen the list, but the first thing that comes to my mind when you say bars in horror, that's what I call a fucking show.
That's because that's never very far from your mind.
Because I love the Danny Trejo.
That's why. That's exactly why.
Woo, okay. So until then, we hope to hear from you, and this is the Fright Club Podcast. She is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
Should I say it?
You say it.
Stay frightful, my friends.